In this next generation, I see a wave of people that are placing an emphasis on authenticity and being raw and honest, which I love. Yet from a leadership standpoint, I get it. Cerebrally, by admission, we can say that we're authentic, but I question the level of emotional labor that's being invested in this next generation and the grace that's given to go through this process and willingness to be vulnerable. We see characters in the Old and New Testament, people like Jacob, who led with a limp. We see Paul, who had this thorn in his flesh. John was banished to an island in complete solitude, where we may not walk with a limp, but we do know what it's like to stumble through life. We may not have a thorn in the flesh, but we know what pain is. We may have never been banished to an island, but we know what isolation and fear and being alone feels like. And we don't look at these leaders and think less of them or feel like they are weak. Brokenness doesn't turn us away from leaders. What it does is it exposes fragile vulnerability that exposes mere humanity. And in that is beautiful. That is what this next generation is looking for. They want to follow people who are okay with themselves and owning who they are, owning a bit of their story. For me, I grew up in an environment where there was a great level placed on being honest and real and keeping it real. I'm going to tell you what I think when I think it. But where there has been a disconnect and from childhood into the beginning part of ministry and leadership for me was that I viewed vulnerability as nothing more than a weakness. I don't want to expose myself. I don't want to tell you where I'm fall short because I'm afraid you're going to use that against me. So I expose myself through transparency. But there's a difference between transparency and authenticity. So I revealed a small bit of a wound or a failure, deflected it with humor or told a story, slapped a scripture on it, and that's like me. Woo, I'm being transparent. I so desperately tried to hold on to the image of what I felt a good Christian leader should be. Perfect and polished and refined and, don't forget the humility because everyone loves to follow a humble leader. And so, but I had to really come face to face and wrestle with vulnerability. And to me, it was scary because vulnerability is mercurial and dangerous and uncontrollable. And I was so afraid of people being able to use that against me. Listen, I may be young, but I ain't stupid. And I've been in ministry long enough to see people open themselves up, accept culpability for a shortcoming, and then people have used that against them and that they have been disqualified from ministry. So I was so afraid that if people really found out the real me, that they would hate me. And everybody has this fear of something, this fear of not being enough, not being smart enough, not being educated enough, not being tall enough or beautiful enough, not having enough connections. But we all feel like we are not blank enough. The media is giving us messaging that we are living in an economy of scarcity. We don't have enough land, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough resources. So how do we expect this next generation of leaders to feel like they are enough if they're constantly being told that we don't have enough? This phrase of not enough was very accustomed to me growing up because I heard it so many times. Not enough resources, finances, education, food. It was never enough, and I began to believe the lie that if my family wasn't enough, then I wasn't going to be enough. And so I lived with this fear, a fear that permeated my life and even my leadership, even the way that I loved. I was so afraid of being exposed. I'm afraid of being afraid. I'm afraid of, I recently got married. I'm afraid of being a bad wife. I'm afraid of being a bad stepmom. I'm afraid of being a horrible leader. I'm afraid of embracing culture while ignoring my history. I am so afraid of pursuing a calling and forgetting my family. I am so afraid of people realizing that I'm not enough. I don't ever want to be viewed, and I'm so afraid of being viewed as that stupid, fat, dumb kid again. I'm so afraid that one day people are going to realize that I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm so afraid that I'm going to have to openly admit that. But here I am acknowledging it and realizing that vulnerability is part and parcel with fear and shame and authenticity. And they all come together in this beautiful synergy. Now, why it's so fearful is because sociological research has shown that fear and shame keep us from authenticity. That as human beings, we are hardwired for acceptance and connection and community. And all those things are threatened when we feel like we are not enough. We're afraid of failure, that there are shame, things that have been done to us, against us, or for us that we're embarrassed about. But it isn't until we deconstruct shame and we acknowledge this fear that we, in a community of people that you're leading, of people that you're loving, of people that you're teaching or serving alongside with, that we come together and sort through this to find an acceptance, to find the beauty in brokenness and amazing story of redemption that God has called you to do as a leader in your home, at school, at work, or in ministry. So simply saying that you're authentic by admission means nothing unless you feel the fear of shame, the embarrassment of failure, to wrestle with the emotional pain and the cognizant awareness of what it means to be vulnerable. So whether that means I need to acknowledge a pride of prejudice, or I need to come face to face with my fear of failure, or if there is an emotional, spiritual, psychological, or financial poverty in life, own it. Because we all, as leaders, want to follow someone who can quote John 15:5, without him, I am nothing. When we lead with our wounds on the outside, we are like Jacob, who will ever be pockmarked with having a face-to-face encounter with God and knowing I am not enough, but with Christ, I can do all things. That is the leadership that people are hungry for, and I hope that you can be authentic in owning that.